Hey guys, welcome to thedirtytank.com. My name is Andrew, and today we're going to dive into 10 fish you have to try at least once. I've had all these fish. These are amazing fish. So let's go ahead and dive into the list now. Alright guys, before we dive into the list, I am going to go through all of these 10 fish, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, the water parameters, the recommended tank size, what they eat, and kind of like their difficulty level. So if you want to get these fish, you will be well informed on their care requirements. So let's start with number one, and this is my favorite fish of all time, and it is the hairy puffer. I absolutely love the hairy puffer. I've owned one for a little bit, and then I moved and I had to sell him, and he was my first pet fish, right? I didn't really consider the other fish to be like pets. They're just part of the hobby, and I really love taking care of them, but this is the first one like I had a really deep connection to. Now, hairy puffers, they are a ambush predator, which means they like to kind of hunker down and kind of slowly stalk their prey before they eat it. They are a full freshwater fish. So a lot of puffers, they're either full marine or they're brackish. This one is full freshwater, so you don't have to worry about mixing salinities or anything like that. Now, this guy is really cool. They get between 4 and 6 inches, and they have these hairs all over them, which is why they're called hairy puffers. And I believe it's pronounced Siri, something like that is what the little hairs are called. But essentially, they look like brown algae or diatoms. And most puffers, they don't like a heavy amount of flow. But this puffer, although he can't swim too well, being in its natural habitat is normally streams. And so they do like a little bit of flow. They don't like it too stale. And it also makes them hunt a little bit because they can sit in an area where the current normally takes the fish anyways, and then they can gobble them up real quickly. Now let's talk about care requirements for this puffer. Now you want to get a tank probably 30 gallons or more is what I would recommend. You may be able to do a 20-gallon long if that's all that's going to be in there, and if he starts to outgrow it, you probably want to put him in something a little bit bigger. I would recommend 30 gallons or more for this fella. They're really cool fish. They love to explore everything in their tank. So 30 gallons or more is what I would recommend. I would also say that you want a ton of plants in there and driftwood and rocks. Definitely rocks, because they like to pretend to be a rock. And so little things that really will stimulate him as part of the environment will go a long way in making sure this puffer is happy. Now, as far as temperature, you want to make sure the temperature is around normal tropical temperature, right? In the mid to high 70s will do for this guy. Now, the difficult part about hairy puffers isn't necessarily water changes, a parameter. It's more feeding this guy, right? You can't use normal flake food or pellet food. He will not eat them. Now, he will eat frozen food, but there's no guarantee that your hairy puffer will eat frozen food. Mine definitely ate frozen food. I would cut up like a jumbo shrimp, and I'll cut up like a quarter of it. I would feed him. Hopefully I can get the video of that on the screen for you, and he will chow down. I fed him earthworms. He definitely loves live food, and I would recommend if you get this fish, you're gonna want to feed live food on occasion. It doesn't have to be fish. It could be snails, it could be shrimp, it could be earthworms, because it really stimulates him intellectually, and you really get to see his hunting kind of behavior, which is really cool. Now, the other thing about this fish is it has a ton of personality. When it sees me and it's really hungry, it will go against the tank and splash water out of the tank just to get my attention. So this is a fish that really bonds with you immediately. He knows you're the source of food. Give me some food, and when you do, especially with the live food, he will go ahead and hunt it down. Now, this fish, as far as how often you feed it, you really want to make sure his belly gets nice and chunky whenever you feed him, and then normally you don't want to feed it until that little bulge in his belly is gone. So normally, 2 times a week may work, maybe 3 times a week will work in feeding this fish. This is not a fish that you have to feed every day. But a really, really cool fish. Now, as far as water quality, I guess pH, you don't necessarily need to match a specific pH, but maybe something just south of neutral, slightly acidic. But as long as you're around, that 6.5 to 7.5, you're gonna be fine with the hairy puffer. Now, we went over temperature requirements, we went over tank requirements. As far as like water quality, yes, you do want to keep the water clean, right? And so you can achieve this by doing regular water changes or maybe slightly less water changes, but a lot of plants. I recommend a lot of plants with this fish anyways, because it just helps them, I don't know, it helps stimulate their curiosity because they're such a curious fish. But the hairy puffer is number one on this list. Now, let's talk about the price range. Now, this fish can go anywhere from 60 bucks to 100 bucks, so they're not a cheap fish. I do recommend you buying them in store if you can, but if you have to ship them, you have to ship them, in which case I would recommend that you overnight this fish. Spend the extra $50, $60 so you can get it overnighted, so they spend less time in the mail, because this is an expensive fish, right? You don't want it dying in the mail. It's gonna break your heart. And then whenever you acclimate this fish, make sure you keep them in water the whole time, right? Because you don't want them to be exposed to air, because they're not going to handle it quite as well as other fish per se. I normally drip acclimate my fish, so you just have a little siphon tube that slowly drips water that from the main tank of wherever they're going into the little cup, 20-30 minutes, and then you put them in. And that's all you need to know about the hairy puffer. If you guys have one, you're thinking about getting one, let me know in the comment section. All right, fish number 2. This is an awesome fish, right? I wasn't too sure about this fish to begin with, but they are so cool. And these are Dwarf Rainbows. Now, Dwarf Rainbows don't get very big. They get about this big. You want to get as many as you can, right? The bigger the school, the better the interaction, the less shy they are. So you want to get at least 6, but if you can get like 10 or 12, do it. You will not regret getting this many. Now, the reason why I love Dwarf Rainbows so much is that they're super active. They seem to be very hardy. They're easy to take care of, and they breed just about every single day. And so if you're interested in a breeding component and you tried live bearers, now you want to go into some kind of egg scatterer, and you want something fairly easy, but that's a little bit more difficult than live bearers, try Dwarf Rainbows. They're not too difficult. It's going to be very forgiving. But let's go over some of the parameters for Dwarf Rainbows. So Dwarf Rainbows, I wouldn't recommend anything less than a 20-gallon long. Obviously, if you can get like a 40-gallon breeder with a ton of plants, and then you just have a ton of Dwarf Rainbows, that will be ideal. But generally about 20-gallon long or above will do. Now, as far as temperature, you want the temperature to be standard tropical, right? So mid to high 70s would work for these guys. They will eat flake food, pellet food, just about anything, baby brine, frozen, live food, right? They'll eat just about anything. So they're not terribly picky from what I've seen. Now, as far as their environment, you do want an open section where they can swim across the tank, and they do appreciate somewhere to hunker down and hide whenever they are kind of feeling kind of shy, or if one gets picked on. You do want some plants in there so that the ones that get picked on can hide, or if they just want a rest from the group, you can do that, but you definitely want plenty of open space for this fish because they love to zoom. Dwarf Rainbows are super cool. Now, if you're looking to breed these guys, they're really easy to breed. You can do it several ways. You can have a spawning mop, and they will lay eggs in the spawning mop, or you can have a moss ball, and they'll lay eggs in the moss ball. Now, the way I bred them, and I bred a buttload of them, is I normally have them in a tank, and I have a ball of moss. I have a couple balls of moss in the tank. I then leave it in there for 1 week. I take it out. I put it in a different tank. I leave that in there for 1 week, and then I take out that second moss ball the next week and put in the other one from the other tank, and it's just a cycle, right? And what you'll see is in that other tank, you'll slowly get these little bitty baby fish. They're tiny, and you want to feed them a lot, and obviously small food. I like feeding them spirulina powder. They seem to really pick up on this and able to grow quickly with spirulina powder. You're going to want to do plenty of water changes to keep that water healthy, and And then once they get to, you know, maybe about that size, you can start putting some flake food in and some frozen food. And then once they're probably a quarter the size of the adults, they can probably go in with the adults and be a-okay, right? And so really cool fish that's really easy to take care of. This fish isn't too expensive. They're about $6 per fish. So if you're thinking about getting 10 of them, that's gonna be like 60 bucks. But the good news is you normally don't have to pay for shipping because these are fairly common in aquarium and fish stores. You can find them. Maybe not the larger chain stores, but a lot of the mom and pops will definitely have them. And they'll probably be in great health too. I normally don't see these guys affected too much by disease like I do see live bearers and maybe like more expensive rams and whatnot. These guys, although they can be affected by all those other diseases, they seem to be fairly healthy every time I've gone. All right, fish number 3 that you have to get. This one is the Endler. So these are very similar to guppies, right? If you watch the other video that I posted last week on 10 fish to avoid, the number 1 was guppies. And that's just because of how overbred they are and how prone they are now to getting some kind of infection or illness. But Endlers are very similar to guppies. They have amazing color patterns. They're flashy. They're always out and about. They're not shy. You can get a bazillion of them. They're a live bear too, right? But they don't seem to be as prone to these illnesses because they're not as overbred, because they're not as popular. Now you are going to have to spend a little bit more on an Endler, maybe another $1 extra, right? If you can get a guppy for $3 to $5, you may be looking at, you know, $5 to $6 for an Endler, right? But I would encourage you to get a handful of these guys. They reproduce like crazy, just like guppies do. They don't get as big, right? So if a guppy gets about this big, an Endler may get slightly smaller. But the color patterns they have is just amazing, in my opinion. Right? Now, as far as parameters, they need the exact same parameters as guppies. So maybe the pH range is slightly north of neutral, so that, you know, 6.5 to like 8 may be okay for them. They also like the standard tropical temperature, so the mid to high 70s would work. And then you can keep them in a 5-gallon or above is what I would recommend, right? If you want a ton of them, if you want a big community tank, you put them a 40-gallon, a 75-gallon, but normally anything 5 and above will do fine for Endlers. These are a really cool fish, and they'll eat just about anything, right? Flakes, frozen food, pellets, live food, whatever you want to feed them, they will definitely eat them. All right, fish number 4 that you definitely have to try if you haven't, and these are rice fish. So rice fish has gotten really popular the past few years, and it's mainly because of mini ponds, right? If you're big into fish keeping, every spring you probably start putting together a mini pond outside and you put guppies or Endlers in there. If you haven't tried rice fish in your mini pond, go ahead and do it. They're an amazing fish. They're super hardy. They can withstand really high temperatures and really cold temperatures. So you don't even have to break down your mini pond. Keep them in there. And the best part is that rice fish are fairly colorful, but most of the color is on top. And these fish swim towards the top of the water. And now your mini pond isn't glass, so you can't see in through it, you know, directly. You can only see through it overhead, which is perfect for rice fish because that's where all the color is at. And so these fish are really cool. You can get some blues, some grays, you get some oranges, ton of different variations. And they're a beautiful fish that aren't that shy either, especially if you get a good bit. Now these fish are going to cost anywhere from $4 to maybe $10 if you get some like really designer one. But they're not that expensive and they're super hardy. Now they lay eggs all the time, and so these fish will, if you get like a group of 5 or 10 of them, by the end of the season you'll have 50, 60, 70 rice fish. 2 years ago when I did a mini tub, I put 10 rice fish in there. These are the Madaka rice fish, and by the end of the season I had roughly over 50, almost 60 rice fish just for those couple months. And so they do reproduce like crazy, just like guppies or other live bears would. Really cool fish if you haven't tried them. All right, fish Fish number 5 is actually not a fish, but it's fully aquatic, so it's on this list. And these are cherry shrimp, right? So any of the variety of cherry shrimp, any Neocaridina shrimp for that matter. So you can have the red cherries, you can have the yellows, you can have the blues, you can have the red rillies, right? The black rillies, all of those are really cool shrimp that you can get. Now, shrimp aren't that difficult to take care of. A lot of people say that they are, and they are more difficult than fish, but they're not that much more difficult. So let me kind of show you how I always prep a shrimp tank for Neocaridina shrimp. Now, what I usually do is it needs to be an established tank, right? So you need to see algae growth on there. So it needs to be cycled, and there needs to be plant life that's kind of thriving, right? The other thing you want to make sure you have is you want to make sure you have all the minerals in the water so that your shrimp doesn't die of a failed molt, right? When I first got into shrimp keeping, I killed so many shrimp because they would go to molt and they would have a failed molt. You hear the ring of death, right? Where they essentially get trapped in their molt and they can't move, and then they slowly just die, right? And so what I didn't realize is I didn't have the right stuff in my water, right? And so you can buy these chemicals to pH up, pH down, general hardness, and change all of that. But what I like to do is just throw some crushed coral in there, and that normally solidifies everything. I haven't had any issues since I started doing that, right? And so cherry shrimp, they like to be, you know, maybe in the low 70s to high 70s. It really depends on what your goal is, right? If you have it slightly lower temperature, there's going to be more females. If you're going to have slightly higher temperature, there's going to be less females, but there's going to be more breeding action. So it just depends how you kind of want it to play out. The way I normally breed my cherry shrimp, because I have bred and sold thousands of cherry shrimp, right? Online, in person, at auctions, at, you know, expos, because they're just an amazing shrimp. And I normally keep mine in the high 70s for, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and then another 3, 4, 5, 6 months is at the lower end of 70s, just to give them some break from, you know, all that breeding action, so you don't wear them out. But cherry shrimp, really, really cool. You can keep them in as small as like a 2-gallon or a 5-gallon. Anything above that would work as well. I generally keep mine in a 10-gallon. Now, the biggest thing you got to worry about with cherry shrimp is making sure other fish don't eat them. So you can keep them in their standalone tank, or you can keep them with smaller community fish, right? Like chili rasboras, like rummy-nosed tetras. So a lot of the smaller tetras and rasboras would work perfect with this fish. Even guppies and endlers would do a-okay without munching down too many of your shrimp. All right, guys, fish number 6 that is a must try is the Stifodon Goi. Now, this goby is really cool. Now, some gobies are brackish or marine. This is a full freshwater goby. I've gotten these guys and I absolutely fell in love with them. Now, they are insanely quick. So if you get them from the fish store, whoever's scooping them out of the tank, it's gonna take a while, right? I was standing there a while before they were able to catch the gobies because they're fairly tiny, but they're super lightning fast. And some of them even tunnel under the substrate, and so you just kind of lose them. But these are a really cool fish. They swim very differently than other fish, right? They mainly use their little, whatever you call these fins, just to kind of float around. They'll only whip their tail whenever they're really trying to book it. But they just kind of flock around and lay on rocks or lay on the substrate. And then these fish particularly, they're algae and biofilm eaters. So you do want an established tank because that's what they're going to do. They can eat all the biofilm and algae off of rocks and glass and plants and whatnot. But they will also eat flake and pellet food as well. So you definitely want to supplement that as well. Don't just think the biofilm in your tank is going to be enough. You're going to want to make sure you feed them also. Now, the Stifodon Gois, they can be kind of territorial towards its own kind. They're a friendly fish. They're not going to mess with the other fish, but other gobies they may, right? And so if you're gonna get one goby, 10-gallon tank is fine. If you're gonna get more than one goby, you probably want a 20-gallon longer or bigger, right? But these guys are really cool. They do like some current, a little bit of current, not a moderate flow, and they do have the ability to kind of suction to the glass and move up. So you definitely want a lid on your tank so they don't accidentally just climb out, right? Because they may do that. These are known jumpers, but if you have a good fitting lid, they're gonna be a-okay. They're not gonna actively try to get out. down. It's more of like an accidental thing, from what I noticed. Now, as far as temperature, they'd like the low to mid 70s will be a-okay for the Stifodon Goi. And as far as other tank mates, anything that can't eat it, obviously you don't want something too big that can eat it because the goby isn't terribly big. So any other similarly sized fish that is also peaceful will do a-okay with the goby. And these fish aren't shy. You're gonna see them come out whenever it's feeding time. Mine always flocks to the front and start munching down on things. Super cool fish. If you haven't got them, definitely try them. They go about $10 to $12 in the fish store, maybe more, maybe less in your area, but that's around how much you can spend. So they're not the cheapest fish, but they're not like super expensive either. So if you get 1 or 2 of them, it would be perfect for your tank. All right, fish number 7, that's a must-have at least once, and these are Bolivian Rams. Now, Bolivian Rams, they're a decent sized fish. They can get about this big. So they're not huge, but they're not tiny either, right? And so you're gonna want at least a 20-gallon long, but you know, maybe a 40-gallon breeder would be perfect, or larger, right? And the Bolivian Rams, their care requirements are going to be a little bit more than some of these other fish, right? This is probably on the intermediate phase, right? Definitely not a beginner fish, but not necessarily advanced either. Bolivian Rams, they are sensitive. They can be sensitive, and they're very prone to dying from stress. And so the biggest thing with Bolivian Rams is making sure you get the right ratio of Bolivian Rams, because they are a territorial fish, but only towards other of the same species. And so generally what I like to have is either you have one or a male-female pair or a group of 4 or more. You don't want to get 2 if you don't know they're a pair. You don't want to just get 3 because one's going to get picked on and die. You want to at least have 4, right? So, you know, 5 or 6 is actually good. Or just stick to one Bolivian Ram. He'll do a-okay on its own. These are a cichlid, so they're known for being aggressive. This one is more territorial than anything, and normally just with its own species or other cichlids in general. But Bolivian Rams are super cool. They're colorful. They really brighten up the reds and the grays whenever they're in breeding mode, and they're excellent parents. They will lay eggs on like on a piece of wood or a piece of rock. They'll lay 300, 400, 500 eggs, and they will guard it with its life. They'll raise the little babies. It's so cool to watch. I've raised plenty of Bolivian Rams, and they're super cool parents, and they're super cool little babies. Now, as far as temperature, you want the mid to high 70s, maybe even low 80s. That whole range will be okay for them. I personally kept mine in about 78 degree temperature, and they did fine there. They also like the water pH to be a little bit south of neutral, so you know that 6.5 to 7.5 would be fine for Bolivian Ram. As far as tank mates, really you want just other peaceful, similarly sized fish. Now, this is a fish that has that traditional stop and go type movement that hangs out towards the lower level, right? And so this isn't one that's going to be zooming up top or in the middle, although they can go anywhere, but they like to spend time towards the substrate. They grab like a pitch of sand, see if there's any food in there, spit out the sand, and they'll just do that all day long. They're definitely not a shy fish, but you definitely want other fish like platies or guppies or something in there so they don't feel like they need to hide, right? They're gonna be observant. If they see other fish swimming around, they're gonna feel comfortable swimming around as well. So really cool fish. Encourage you to get them if you haven't. All right, fish number 8, that's a must try. And I thought this was a really common fish, and it is, but every time I talk about Carbensis, because that's the fish, a lot of people haven't heard of them for some reason. But I would recommend just getting the normal Carbensis, the Pelvichromis pulcher. Now, this fish gets about this big, the male, and the female may get a little bit smaller. The coloration on this fish is incredible. The deep reds, the deep purples, the yellows. This fish has it all. They're a gorgeous fish. Now, they are a cichlid. They're a dwarf cichlid, so they don't get too big, right? And generally, they're going to be territorial, and they're going to guard its zone pretty well, but mainly towards other cichlids. Now, when it does lay eggs, it's going to be more protective and chase anything away, because they are very good parents. Now, they are cave spawners, which means that if you do get a Carbensis, get a cave, because it's going to look for a cave to be its home. home. So you can get the coconut shell, or you can just build something, a rock structure where it can go in there and call its home. And the way it lays eggs is it has sticky eggs. It doesn't lay it down. It actually lays it on the roof and on the side of the cave. And then they'll fan the eggs, and they'll slowly bring food in once it hatches and throw it, so the little babies can eat it. And once they get a certain age, they'll take them on field trips all across the tank. It's so fun to watch. Like, I would recommend you guys getting a 20-gallon long or a 40-gallon breeder. Just put one pair of Crebensis and just wait until they have babies and just watch the little cloud babies just follow it around. It's so cool to watch. They're great parents. But let's talk about what's needed. As far as temperature, you probably want this to be upper 70 range, right? Mid to high 70s is probably where they like to be. They like the pH to be just south of neutral, so the 6 to 7.5 in that range will be fine for them. And then other than that, they're very similar to all other fish in terms of diet. They will eat flakes and pellet foods, but you definitely want to fat them up, especially if you want them to reproduce. You can feed some bloodworms and shrimp and whatnot, and they'll gladly start to probably reproduce more. But a really cool fish with a ton of personality, absolutely beautiful, that has like one of the best parents I've seen. All right, fish number 9 is the Gardneri killifish. This fish is so cool. And the fish only gets about this big, but it has a huge mouth, right? And the male is really colorful. It has the yellows, it has the blues, it has the whites, it could have some reds, right? It's a really, really cool looking fish. And the female is a little bit more bland, right? She's just an all solid brownish hue to her. But they have tons of personality too. The males are normally a little bit more skittish than the female from what I noticed. But if you have other fish in there that are swimming around that aren't shy, they're not going to be shy either. Now, these fish will eat their own babies, right? They are egg layers, and they lay eggs all the time, but they won't take care of their babies, right? And so if you do want to raise them, you want a ton of plants so that some babies will survive, or you're going to have to do the spawning mop Java moss method, where you leave it in there for a week, move it to another tank, and just do that cycle over and over. But as far as tank mates, they can go with similarly sized fish that aren't aggressive, and they'll be a-okay with them. They're a fairly peaceful fish from what I've seen. Now, as far as what they eat just about anything. They will eat flakes and they will eat pellets, but frozen food goes a long way also. And as far as pH, they can handle, south of neutral to, a little bit above neutral. So, that 6 to 7.5 range will be perfect for the Gardneri killifish. Now, these fish are jumpers, so you're going to want to have a lid, otherwise you might find them on the floor, but they're definitely worth a try because they're super, super cool. Really cool fish to look at that a lot of people actually don't have. Now, fish number 10 that you need to try. This fish is cool. Now, it hunkers down and hides a lot, but during feeding time, it always comes out. So it's kind of like a treat when it comes out. I used to go on TikTok live, and everyone would ask, show me this fish, because it's so weird looking. But that is the spotted Raphael catfish. Now, the spotted Raphael catfish gets about this big, right? Maybe between 4 and 6 inches, so they don't get huge. But they are all black. They look like a catfish. They look like a miniature catfish. They have white dots all over their body, and they have an armored plated back, right? And so they're extremely tough, right? Even if they're with more aggressive fish, this guy is not going to get picked on. And this guy is actually like super hardy. Like, they're hard to kill. Now, you are going to have to eat them or feed them, not eat them. You are going to have to feed them, but they will eat anything, right? Like a traditional catfish, whatever falls to the bottom, they're going to gobble it up. What I notice is this fish likes to hide, right? But whenever it's feeding time, I see his little tail move, and then his body moves, and then he starts going around the tank gobbling food that he can buy, and then he'll go back home. Really cool fish. Every time you see him, he'll get a little bit fatter and a little bit fatter, because he'll just keep on chowing down again. But the spotted Raphael catfish has the same requirements as most other tropical fish, so mid to low to even high 70s would work for this fish. They'll eat anything. Probably want them in like a 30-gallon or larger, I would say. I had mine in a 75-gallon, but I had a ton of other fish in there too, and he did absolutely amazing. Now, if you have a larger tank, you can get a group of them. You get 2 or 3 of them and they'll do okay. They actually prefer to be in groups, but they're not a schooling fish by any means. You can have one-offs. But if you do have more than one, they actually talk to each other. They make these vibrating croak sounds that is actually kind of weird to hear the first time you hear it. But if you have 2 or more, you'll hear that normally at night. They'll make these little vibrating croak sounds and they're just communicating, I guess. But a really cool fish, easy to care for. The biggest thing is they can get stuck in your net because just like plecos, they're gonna flap out their fins, and they're super bony and armored, and it's easy to get stuck in the holes in the net. Every time I had to move them because I was moving locations or whatever it happened to be, its fins would always get stuck and it would take like 10 minutes to get them out. But they always turned out okay. So that's just something to keep in mind when you get this fish. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed these fish. Let me know if you have any of them. Let me know if you're eyeballing any of them. If you have any additional questions on any of them, I can tell you my personal experience because I have owned all these fish before. And that's gonna wrap up this video, guys. See you next time.